Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Life Short Talk Fast podcast. My name is Tiffany Jackson, and I am your host. Today, we're going to be talking about Gilmore Girls Season 5, Part 2. And just a reminder, I have a whole, four, four seasons of this show over on Spotify if you want to go catch up with that. But for today, we are talking about Season 5, Part 2. So, for those of you new to my podcast, this is how we do it. I'm going to break it down by each Gilmore Girl, and that's how we're going to section out the podcast and talk about it. So, first, we're going to talk about Emily because her content is the shortest. And honestly, from this point on, I don't know who this character is. She becomes a caricature of herself, and this is especially evident in season 7, where you have somebody who may not, and I really don't know David S. Rosenthal's personality, other than he is oddly obsessed with Heidi Klum. That's a whole thing. It's legitimately a thing. You can go Google that. It's creepy. Anyway, he may not have had the same life experiences as Amy, and that's probably why, his version of Emily is not Emily, in my opinion. She becomes kind of a caricature of herself. Daniel had the tendency to do this as well, even though he was Amy's husband and had been around, I'm sure, been around her mother at least once or twice. I don't know. To be fair, maybe that's how he saw her. I truly don't know. But she basically activates Chris like he's the Terminator or a sleeper agent or something. And then that's it. Her next big plot line involves Richard and Rory and the whole, thing to get her back on track, back into school, that sort of thing. But other than that, all she does is manipulate and connive, and we don't get that many more softer moments with her and Lorelai. We can get two that I can think of right off the bat, and that would be what is it? The scene in season 6 when she's had laser eye surgery and she's in the Jay-Z van, and her and Lorelai are running errands, and she takes Lorelai to this real estate office, and this is after we've seen her and Richard running around through Stars Hollow. There's a very sitcom-y moment with Lorelai in that, and I hated that part. But then, it turns out that she was buying a house for her, and that's when Lorelai has her breakdown and realizes that she probably won't marry Luke in this moment. And the comfort that Emily shows her there is very genuine and kind. And then in, when is it? Season 7, I think. It's when Lorelai and Christopher are fighting. They're on the verge of divorce, and she gives her some actual motherly advice, which I don't think she'd gotten the opportunity to do for Lorelai since, Lorelai booked out when she was 16. See, a lot of the people who criticize Emily for how she chooses to parent or give Lorelai advice is they kind of forget the context of when Lorelai left the Gilmores, because she was 16. She was still growing. She was still developing. She was still becoming her own person. Yeah, Lorelai had a very, very strong personality at 16, but Emily never got to give her any kind of grown-up motherly advice. Sometimes you're going to have to compromise with your husband, which might seem in retrospect, well, duh, but let's look at who we're talking about here. This is Lorelai. Lorelai needs to be told that there's going to be compromises. All right, I'll get off that soapbox for now. It irritates me when I can look back at the other 4 seasons and even the beginning of season 5, and I can see a completely different person in Emily than I see for the rest of the show until we get to the revival. I think in the revival, Emily gets back to being that person that I saw in the first 4.5 seasons of this show. The person who is, yes, conniving and manipulative and a little bit evil. But you know what? It all comes from a place of love. And quite honestly, oh goodness, she's doing what she thinks is best and how she knows how to love. Is it always the right thing? Most of the time, no. But it comes from a place of caring. From this moment on, from the moment she activates Chris like a Terminator on until we hit the first episode of the revival, until winter drops, we pretty much just get the same character from Emily. And it is exhausting. I understand now why people don't like her and don't want to like admit that she's a favorite character of theirs. But you know what? I'm Team Emily, like through and through. I think that 90% of the time she is coming from a place of love and goodness. Now, this whole thing with Luke and Christopher, I'm not really sure where it came from. Her thinking of Christopher kind of came out of the blue. You know, she hasn't mentioned Christopher in a while, other than, you know, when his father died. And other than that, like, she hasn't hinted at, you know, you and Christopher should be together because he's Rory's father. No, it hasn't really developed that much. And then all of a sudden, she goes to Christopher and she's like, this is your last chance. I've seen her getting serious with this diner man. I'm sorry, I've really been working on my Emily impression and it's getting so much better. I don't know if I could do that like Northeast accent that Kelly Bishop has where, you know, like sometimes she kind of slips up and she says like treasure and things like that. Or measure. It's a very interesting accent. But I mean, that's pretty much all we get for and from Emily. I will say that, you know, Rory acted very childish at that first Friday night dinner after their second honeymoon. And that is a whole thing we're going to talk about in the Rory section because we start to see some stuff from Rory this season. I know a lot of people say it starts in season 6. Nay, you guys know when I said it started. It started in season 4 when she bought the tree. I'm still irritated about that, by the way. I am still so incredibly irritated that she thought it was okay to pay $20 to sit under a tree like that. Who does that? And then, like, in the next episode, she's complaining about how she doesn't have any money. Well, girl, you're spending $20 on trees. Anyway, like, Emily's storyline from in season 5 up to Wedding Bell Blues was wonderful. If you have listened to the first half of this season's podcast, I kind of gush about it. Like, we get to see a different side of Emily that we don't get to see. We see Emily with a backbone against Richard. She almost always kowtows to Richard and almost always submits to him because she's the wife and that's what she's supposed to do. I like that in the beginning of season 5, she doesn't, because he's driven a wedge between Lorelai and her parents. And Emily's like, well, we just got this back and you ruined it. Now, granted, most of the conflict over that is wrapped up fairly quickly. And by the halfway point of this season, our grandparents are back together. And I do love that in their like announcement episode, they're like, and like, we've decided that you're going to be my maid of honor and you're going to be best man. And they didn't even talk to them about it. It was just assumed. The only other bit of Emily that I really, really enjoyed in this half of the season was her bachelorette party. I love that, like, because it is totally Emily to, like, not tell Lorelai that she wanted a bachelorette party and to just assume that Lorelai would throw her one because she's getting married, you know? And yeah, I realize this is a vow renewal and they're getting remarried. They've already been married for, like, 4 years, so... Yeah. Anyway, her bachelorette party is great because we get some really good, like, broad acting from Kelly Bishop. And I don't mean, like, broad. I mean, like, chain smoking in a dressing gown in the middle of the day, reading salacious romance novels, drinking mojitos broad. That is what I love about Kelly Bishop. When she's just an old broad, love it. Absolutely. It's not that I don't love Emily Gilmore when she's, you know, Miss Prim and Proper, but as soon as she lets that, like, broad slip through, I'm like, Emily. Kind of like in season 6, when we're about to see her dress down Shira Huntsberger. I cannot wait for that, okay? I cannot wait for that dressing down. It's so good. But we're talking about season 5. Okay. But anyway, her bachelorette party. So I love that Lorelai's plan is to just get her as drunk as possible and have all these people from Stars Hollow that she doesn't even know aren't going to the wedding the next day just come over and hang out and drink. And they do. Oh boy, do they. Because I mean, like the next morning, Rory and Lorelai are running around gathering up their stuff and getting ready, curling their hair, all that kind of stuff. And then like Luke comes to pick him up, and it's so funny. Like, Luke's like, aren't you guys gonna lock up when they're getting ready to leave? And she's like, oh yeah, I guess we should. And Lorelai yells to Babette, hey Babette, can you lock up when you leave? And Babette just shoots up from the couch and says, yeah, sugar. Sally Struthers, Liz Torres, Sean Gunn, the townies from Stars Hollow usually get the best lines in these later seasons. They're usually like A1 material. They truly are. But I think it's because in the later seasons, they realized, like, this show isn't going to do anything. Like, we're done. This is it. I'm having a good time. Why not just keep having a good time? Like, I think that's Liz Torres's, like, motto for life. Like, don't get me wrong. But I feel like by the end of the show, like, even Sean Gunn was like, yeah, I kind of love it here. But, I mean, Kirk is just Kirk now. There is no differentiation between Sean Gunn and Kirk at this point. You know? And I get that that doesn't make a lot of sense to people who have seen him in, like, the Marvel movies, who may not have seen him in Gilmore Girls or Bunheads or grown up with it kind of the way that I did. I watched a lot of the reruns on ABC Family as a kid. I don't think I ever watched the show live, but I watched a lot of the reruns on ABC Family, and then once it like switched to Freeform, it dropped Gilmore Girls. Well, it dropped Gilmore Girls a long time before that, but it dropped Gilmore Girls, and then Netflix, released the show in 2016, and I jumped on the binge bandwagon. That's actually the first time I saw season 7. So, anyway, let's see. So, yeah, Emily's bachelorette party. I keep getting sidetracked. I am so sorry, guys. So yeah, Emily's bachelorette party. So yeah, Suki stumbles in at some point, half asleep because the kids were awake late, and Emily is sloshed. She is so gone. And Gypsy walks in and she's like, Gypsy! And Rose Abdu's face at that moment is probably my favorite, because I don't think they told her what Kelly Bishop was going to do. I don't think she expected Kelly Bishop to go that big. Which is why I am so glad that, like, they shared so many more scenes in the revival, because I love Berta. I think Berta is a fantastic character, and I think it's so funny that Rose Abdu got to do that and also got to play Gypsy at the same time, because I love Rose Abdu, and I love that she got to play a little bit of a funkier character, you know? Oh, we also get that cameo from Miss Celine, and when she's picking out wedding dresses. And I do love when Alex Borstein decides to put on that old age makeup and become Miss Celine. I think it's funnier in the revival, though, because you're like, Miss Celine's still alive? You know? Okay, so I'm done with Emily. Like, she had her Terminator moment, she gets remarried, and then she manipulates and bickers from behind the scenes for the rest of the season. Until we get to that moment. And I probably should have prefaced with this, but I am not going to be talking about the finale of season 5 in this episode. I will be talking about the season finale actually in the next episode. I will touch on it. I will mention what happens, but the way that it flows into season 6, episode 1, I think is better. I think, if I'm remembering correctly. I haven't watched the end of season 5 yet. I know, shame on me. But I have also seen this show like 7 times through at this point. I remember most of the chronological stuff. But yes, okay. So I'm remembering correctly, at the end of this season, we get that horrible scene with Rory and Lorelai, and Rory's moving into the pool house and all that stuff. So I really want to talk about that at the beginning of season 6, because I think from the end of season 5, beginning of season 6, there's this massive tone change, not only with Rory and Lorelai, but with the entire show. And I'm going to talk about like why I thought that happened. And it's not for the reason that you think. So there's that. I will talk about, Rory stealing the boat, going to jail. All of that will be talked about in this episode, but I'm not going to talk about the split quite yet. So I'm very sorry if y'all came here for that, and I'm very sorry if y'all like expected that from me at this point. I'm sorry. You'll get it in the next episode, in the next video. I promise. Okay, so Lorelai. I'm moving on to Lorelai next because she also has a very short amount of actual stuff that she does at this point in the show. She gets 3 major episodes after Wedding Bell Blues, which I feel like is the true halfway point of this season, like dramatically. But because of the way the episode count was laid out, it ended up being like the second episode in the second half of the season. So that's why like it feels kind of funky when I mention it and talk about it. And, it's not episode number 11, it's episode number 13. So I do understand that like it's weird, or it's episode 12. It's either 11 or 12 or 13. It's one of those. So at the end of Wedding Bell Blues, though, we get that moment where Lorelai, like, she had this wonderful day with Luke. She has been with Luke this whole season, and it's magic, and it's wonderful. And then Wedding Bell Blues happens, and Christopher shows up, and Christopher gets drunk, and Christopher screws everything up like he always does. See, this is part of the reason why I am so team, like, anti-Christopher, because he's so opportunistic and so weaselly that he saw, like, this tiny little window in his drunk little mind, and he went for it. And it was wrong. And then, when he catches Rory in the green room with Logan, and they're making out and stuff, again, no, you don't get to do that. Like, I get that you're her father and all that stuff, but you don't get to do that. Luke gets to do that because Luke has known that girl and has been in that girl's life a lot longer than you. And in fact, he was at her high school graduation and you weren't, which I'm still irritated by that, by the way. It's so irritating that he wasn't at the time. Well, no, Gigi was born. That's true. But his oldest daughter's high school graduation where she was valedictorian. I would have been heartbroken, I don't know. But I feel for Lorelai in that moment because her entire world, apart from Rory, just comes like crashing down around her. She had finally built up a good relationship with her parents, gone because Emily schemed behind their backs. Well, her relationship with Emily is gone. I will say she does actually maintain like a very healthy professional relationship with her father, and even like almost a loving relationship with her father, because it wasn't his fault. He didn't do anything. He didn't know about the manipulation. He was totally out of it. And you know what? They did give Emily this leeway, like at the beginning of season 5, because she had nothing to do with the whole Jason situation, but the separation was going on, so that's what they were focusing their energy on. They weren't focusing on the fact that Emily, like, went outside of the couple to manipulate, or Richard went outside the couple to manipulate. They were focusing on, well, because that happened, they split, and there's no reason to talk about the fact that he manipulated the situation from outside the couple, unless we're talking about reconciliation. So we don't have that moment here. Richard never leaves Emily for causing this divide. He doesn't really even pitch a fit about it. He just kind of accepts the situation. He accepts the fact that he is the favorite, and he's okay with that. Which, I mean, if it was Lorelai and Rory, I'd probably behave the same way, quite honestly. Like, oh, I'm your favorite? Okay, that means I'm going to be, taken care of. I'm the one who's going to get the good nursing home. Yeah. So, that's so stupid. But at the same time, like, I don't think Lorelai would ever do that to her mother or her father. I do think that, like, things would be taken care of. Oh, that was so bad. I'm sorry. But, Richard kind of revels in the fact that he's the favorite. I mean, Emily even kind of points it out, because you're the favorite. It's always that way. It's always been that way with these girls. Like, because Lorelai has harbored such hard feelings for her mother for the past, 18 years, truly the last 30 plus years of her life, she like has passed some of that down to Rory, and Rory has definitely picked up on that. Not only that, but she is more soft-spoken and she's a little bit more reserved, like her grandfather. So they click personality-wise as well anyway. So there you go. Anyway, but her relationship with Lorelai's relationship with Luke also comes crashing down in that moment because, and I totally understand where he's coming from, but he also should have realized that it was coming. How manipulative the Gilmores truly are. I honestly think that he should have seen that coming. In all the years that Lorelai has been coming and going from that diner and complaining about her parents, and even in the short amount of time they've been in a relationship together, she has complained about how manipulative her parents are. How did he not see the signs and the red flags all over the place, other than he was so smitten by Lorelai that it just didn't matter? And you know what? I get that. I get being in that situation. But because I am a very family-oriented person, I tend to look at how others are with their families. Like, just a little bit about me. I have a lot of first cousins, and we all grew up together for the most part. We are still fairly close to this day. Like, most of us live in the same town. And, like, we still see each other at our grandparents' for holidays and things like that. And we see each other quite a bit. We talk to each other quite a bit. And, like, so family for me is a big deal. It is a huge deal. It is like a make or break for me. If you're good with your family, we're good. I kind of broke that rule with my husband. But the way that he treats his grandmother is A1 chef's kiss. So I made an exception. But anyway, if I were Luke and I were the loner type and I saw how Lorelai's family was reacting and how she complained about them all the time, I would have had misgivings. And we do kind of see that. He does mention, hey, maybe I shouldn't go to this thing. Your parents don't really like me. Like, he's aware that they don't approve of him and they don't want her to be with him. But he also thinks, well, Lorelai's a grown woman and she's not going to, not date me because her parents told her not to. Yeah. So I get like why he didn't run for the hills, but I would not have gone to that vow renewal. Not at all. Like, I would have said, hey, listen, we have not been together that long, and your parents already don't like me. And if you really want me to go, I will show up for the ceremony. But that's it. I will show up for the ceremony. I will stay for the reception for you. We are staying for like 30 minutes and we're taking pictures and then we're going. Like, your parents don't like me and I don't want to be around people who don't like me. You know what I mean? But then again, I can see how that would be problematic as well. Like, this was a no-win situation for Luke in a lot of ways. And guys, I feel awful because I want Luke and Lorelai to be together and I want them to be happy and I want Emily and Richard to be happy that they're together and I want Lorelai to like connect with her family and try and build the Gilmore name back up to where it should be. And the fact that they used to be closer and they need to be closer again. And it's a lot. So, but then like we get scenes like from Jews and Chinese food and Say Something, and it's just, I love it. I fall in love with Lorelai more often than I think Luke does. It's just how it is. Like, Lauren Graham is a fantastic face actor, and Say Something, when she's begging Luke to say something to her, to talk to her. Now, I get, like, she definitely was in the wrong there. She needed to give Luke his space. But when she's begging him to say something to her in that scene, my heart is broken. And, oh, God. Okay, guys. Then we get the reunion, and Luke and Lorelai are back together. And then that's it. There really is no conflict between them again until season 6 when April is brought in. But Luke is no longer a source of, like, problem or tension for her at this point. No, now we switch to Rory being the point of tension for her, because then we roll right into Rory stealing a boat and going to jail, and then committing the cardinal sin of dropping out of Yale. Oh my God. And Lorelai, I don't know how, like, her head just didn't explode. And it kind of does, which is why she goes to the grandparents in the first place. But I would have walked away at that point. I wouldn't have gone to her grandparents. I would have been like, you know what? You're just going to throw all of this back in my face at me? Okay, we're done. Like, you obviously need a break from me. I obviously need a break from you. Like, done. Go to your grandparents, go to Lane's, go somewhere, but you can't come home unless you go to school. So, make your decision. And that is kind of what she does going forward. Like, going forward after Rory goes behind her back like a sneaky little... And, we're going to get to it. Oh, I can't wait to get to it. Because, this might have to be a whole separate video. Like, just the audacity of Rory Gilmore. And I do think I am going to make that at the end of this season, or at the end of this series. I am going to make a whole video on the audacity of Rory Gilmore. And, like, she goes behind her dad's or her mother's back and she talks to the grandparents. How did she think that was going to go good? She couldn't have. I think she was desperate to get out of the situation that she had put herself in. But again, she had made her bed and she was, like, Lorelai was trying to force her to lie in it. And Richard and Emily were like, oh no, dear, come over here. We have a nice bed that the maid has made for you. Now you don't have to lie in any mess that you've made. Yeah, so. But I mean, then we get some tension with that, but a lot of that tension, again, is in season 6. Lorelai is not the center of our story from the point that she and Luke get back together. No, it shifts again to Rory. And at this point, Logan and Rory are like together. They get together. And he is such a bad influence on her. I did a whole podcast on Logan Huntsberger and why I think he's awful, but I never talked about the influence he holds over Rory. So for Rory, Logan represents her grandparents' world. He does. He truly does. And how seductive it can be and how enticing it can be and how much, like, she could fit in that world. And you know what? If you want to fit into that world, that's perfectly fine. But for the first, 5.5 seasons that we've seen this show, she wasn't that person. She was not, my Birkin bag. She was not the Richie Rich girl. She was Rory Gilmore, and that's it. But Logan has this, like, power over her that causes her to think and act differently than we've seen her act. Now, I have mentioned that Rory doesn't really have a personality outside the person that she's dating, and that's really, really evident with Logan, because she starts to become very dismissive of a lot of bad behaviors that I don't think she would have been with Jess or with Dean or even in the future with Paul. Although I don't know Paul enough to, like, form an idea of how she would treat that relationship. Anyway, like, I get it, okay? I do. I would be sucked in by the rich person and all the nice things and all that kind of stuff at the same time. It's like Jess says. She used to make fun of those types of guys. She never wanted to be those kinds of guys, and now she is eating it up. Like, girl, what is you doing kind of moment. And it causes her to steal a damn boat. It causes her to commit a felony. Now, I realize she was kind of triggered, but when it comes to Mitchum, we ultimately see that he was not wrong, you know? And I've said this before, and I will say it again. I'll shout it from the damn rooftops. Mitchum Huntsberger was right about Rory. I think he could spot her a mile away. When you're the type of person that Mitchum is, you can see the drive in people. You can see the want, the fire. And Rory didn't have any of that. Think back to her first day at the Stanford Gazette in that internship. She's nervous. She shows that she's nervous. She is hyperactive. She's insane in that episode. Now, the next time we see her, it's 2 weeks later. She is coming to the end of her, internship there. And Mitchum is going to start leaving and pulling back. So she's going to be done. And he sits her down and he talks to her. And he's like, hey, listen, I don't think you have the drive or the desire to become a journalist. You're probably a pretty good writer, but you don't have the drive to do this job. And you know what? He's right. I'm so sorry, but every time we see Rory report on something, she doesn't. Like, with the whole download versus CD thing, she gave up on that story halfway through. Admittedly, it was a bad story, but she could have reworked it somehow, I'm sure. And if she didn't, she could have moved on to a totally different topic. But no, the Life and Death Brigade thing just falls right in her freaking lap. And from then on, she starts dating one of those sources. It is not only that, but she just completely ignores any kind of journalism ethics when she goes to this retreat with them, doesn't follow the rules laid out by her source, which is something that you should do as a journalist. You should respect your source. She doesn't. And then again, she starts dating one of them. That is not journalism, in my opinion. And then we see it really showcased in A Year in the Life. And I think this was Amy's last attempt to really drive home that Rory is not a newspaper girl. Because in season 7, we see her actually being a newspaper girl. She gets a job, or she's writing pieces for Slate. She is, or whatever online magazine she's writing for. I think it's Slate or something similar to that. And then she gets the job on the Obama campaign trail. And then we hear in A Year in the Life that she's written for the New Yorker. And that sounds like something a reporter or somebody like Rory would absolutely do. But then we see her at Sandy Says, and it's a train wreck. We see her doing that line story. She finds the story. She finds it. I'm sorry, I'm getting very worked up about this because I'm trying to defend Mitchum, but it's really hard to, because he has only known Rory for 2 weeks. But at the same time, after this moment, we see so much more. We see evidence of the fact that she can't do this job, that she's not meant for this job. Yes, she becomes editor of the Yale Daily News, but that is something completely different than being actually in the field and reporting. Because while she was reporting for the Daily News is when she did some things with questionable journalistic intention. And yeah. Oh, gosh. Anyway. So, yeah, I don't believe that Mitchum was wrong at all. Just speaking from personal experience, I am not somebody with a lot of ambition and drive. It's just not who I am. I'm very laid back. And yeah, it's usually to my detriment. 90% of the time, it's to my detriment. But, we recognize our own. And I see that in Rory Gilmore. She talks a lot about how she wants these things. Well, she doesn't really put in a lot of the work to get it. With the Rest and Fellowship, she put all of her eggs in that one basket. And I realize that, again, that's a season 7 thing. But she talks about all these wants and these desires. And she doesn't take a lot of the steps that she would need to take to actually get there. And I feel like Rory just fell off the wagon in season 5, the end of season 5, when Mitchum told her that she didn't got it, that she would make a better assistant, which she would, or that, maybe she's a novel writer or something like that. Oh, he didn't say that, but that's what I kind of inferred from that. If she wants to write, she should still write, but she could write novels. She could write anything. She does not have to be a journalist. She doesn't. And we clearly see that in the future. But at this point, yeah, it sets her off. It triggers something in her head, in her little gifted and talented mind. Oh no, somebody told me no. Somebody, said I wasn't good enough, or that I couldn't do something. And because she is so wrapped up in this need for approval, and all of these people around her are constantly kissing her ass and telling her how good she is, when she's really not that great. She's good, but she's not that great. And then you have one of the top newspaper men in the entire country, if not the world, come and tell you, you don't got it, kid. You should not work in newspapers. Yeah, that's going to crush anybody. It's going to destroy anybody. But you know what? I've gotten news like that. I had a chef, when I was still cooking, sit me down and tell me that if I didn't change my attitude, and if I didn't start, actively working to better myself, and actively working to be more ambitious, then I was never going to make it as a cook. I was never going to make it as a chef. I was never going to make it very far at all. And you know what? He was right too. Because I didn't. Now, granted, I did end up hurting myself, and that kind of kept me out of the game for a while. And now I have no desire to go back, because I don't desire to be abused. So there's that. But at the same time, I don't have the drive and ambition to be a great chef. I don't have the drive and ambition to be that person, and I'm okay with that. I have made my peace with that. I am perfectly content with how my life has turned out so far. Could it be better? Of course. Could it be worse? Yeah, it really could. And I think Rory got the shock from Mitchum, because she was expecting somebody else who kind of knew of her, to just fall down at their feet and worship her. But we constantly see that, Amy just throwing in random things to tell us that she's not great and that she shouldn't be treated like this. And it's coming from, most of the praise, honestly, comes from her parent and her grandparents, and maybe occasionally from Paris, and occasionally from Lane, and occasionally from Luke. But let me tell you, those 3 Gilmores, they inflated that head, and then Mitchum popped it. So, unfortunately, she learns nothing from this experience, except that I don't like Mitchum Huntsberger. But she doesn't learn anything. Yeah, she does kind of throw herself at the Stanford Gazette, but how long does that last? We don't even see it again after she gets the job. She doesn't work very hard when she's doing these magazine pieces either. We don't ever see it. And because we're just told it and not shown it, it rings false, in my opinion. It rings very false, and it doesn't feel right. And honestly, I'm not the only one that feels this way. I know I keep talking about them, but I'm almost finished with their whole Gilmore Girls cast. But the Gilmore guys have explained this out a lot better than I could. The problem is they're not on Mitchum's side, because he only knew her for 2 weeks. But again, in those 2 weeks, he could see drive and ambition. He could see what she wanted to do, and what she wanted to do was people please. She wanted to make herself available to Mitchum, please Mitchum. And because she did that, because she didn't do any self-serving and she only served Mitchum, that's how he saw her. He saw her as an assistant. He saw her as this person who had no drive or no ambition to be a journalist. And she really doesn't have that drive after college. And we can kind of see her in those season 7 episodes when she starts to feel so lost. And I think it's because she doesn't want to be a journalist. I think season 1, yeah, absolutely. Season 2, sure, go ahead. But by the time we are in college, we are at the Yale Daily News, I think she's over it. I truly do. I don't think she enjoys newspaper life. I think she enjoys writing, and I think she's good at that. but I don't think she's a newspaper person. Mostly because of the drive and ambition thing, and she's not cutthroat enough. She's not Paris, which, why is Paris on the paper? Her majors are, she's pre-law and pre-med. Where does journalism fit into that? Where does that paper fit into that? How does she have time? How the heck does she have time? Like, do a lot of pre-med and pre-law classes overlap that I'm not aware of? I don't think they do, or they can. You know? I don't. This is why she has a breakdown in season 6. This is why. Because she shouldn't even be on the paper. Ugh, all right. The only other shining light from this season, because there's only one. There's only one more. Paris and Doyle get together, and it's magic. I'm sorry. You guys know they're one of my endgame couples, and I love them together so much. And they get together in this season, and that is one of the only bright spots of season 5. It's like that, Wedding Bell Blues, the episode itself, because that is probably my favorite Gilmore Girls episode. And then Luke and Lorelai. Like, those are the bright spots in this vast valley of darkness. And when we come back to season 6, guys, I promise I'm really going to delve into that whole conversation that Lorelai had with her parents in the final episode of season 5. But when we come back for season 6, y'all, be prepared. I'm going to go in harder than I have, which is surprising because season 6 is my least favorite season. It is the worst season, and it's not for the reasons that you guys are thinking. It's not because of April, and it's not because of the split, and it's not because Amy was vindictive against the show because she got fired or because she left. No, the energy is so messed up, okay? Like, we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it. I'm excited. I can't wait to see y'all in the next couple of days, or maybe even tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. I got stuff to do tomorrow. Sorry, Fridays are reserved for when my grandmother, who is 90 years old, comes over and spends time with my son, who is 4 years old. So, yeah, Fridays are reserved. You guys are never going to get an upload on Friday unless I miss a Thursday or something. So, anyway, I love y'all's faces, and I hope to see y'all very, very soon. Bye.